All right, Adam, we are ready to preview a game finally. And we've talked so much about this team over the last, 8, 9 months through signing day and spring football and all through the summer and camp. But we're ready to talk about a game. So, you ready to preview UNC?
I think so, although it's difficult. Yeah, you're right. You get so excited to talk about an opponent, and then you really want to break down the opponent, and the opponent hasn't played a football game in 650 days.
Yeah.
That makes it tougher. They've got 65 guys on their roster that have never played for the Bears, 17 transfers. It makes it really difficult. Obviously, there's a lot of McCaffreys up there in Greeley these days, but I mean, even Carl Drell said it's really hard to game plan for this game.
Yeah, and last week when we were down in Denver for an event with all the coaches, I had a chance to sit down with Ed McCaffrey, and I asked him just about the Buffs that are up at UNC, the former Buffs. And I said, well, how are those guys doing? He said, well, I just make it a policy not to talk about any, scheme or anything like that. So he wouldn't even tell me how those Buffs are doing. So, just kind of a softball question. He wouldn't even get into that. But many of them are showing up on the two deep at UNC. But this is a tough one to gauge because, how many players? I mean, there's so many players that have never played for UNC. There's a lot of transfers. You look at the talent on this team, and they've got a quarterback and a running back from Michigan. They got receivers from Washington State and TCU and Akron, guys that have been successful. They got linebackers from other, from FBS schools. So there's a lot of D1 talent here, but how does it all come together?
And bottom line is they're picked last in the Big Sky. So, yes, that doesn't always translate to what's going to happen in the season, but this is a football game if you're CU that there's no excuses to not play well. But you also delve into the very depressing history that this program has had against FCS programs. If it wasn't for a Chappelle Brown interception against Eastern Washington, they would have started out 0-3 against FCS schools. So there's no question you have to take this seriously. And I also say this, Brian, CU might come out of the gates kind of slow too. It's been a while since they've played in the game.
Yep.
And if they go 3 and out their first offense, I can already see it happening. The Buffs Twitter is going to be freaking out. It's going to be OMG, the sky is falling. Let's jump from a building. Give it at least till halftime. That's my PSA here. Is give it till halftime.
Right.
And then what I think, I'm going to predict, maybe CU has a slow start, but by the end of it, I think it's going to be a lopsided score.
Yeah, and that's kind of the way it was in 2017 when UNC came up here. I mean, and this is probably maybe more talented UNC team. Maybe, but it was a 41-21 game, but it was a game into the third quarter, and the Buffs couldn't play their backups in that game because it was a tight game throughout, and 41-21 is not a blowout. It could be similar this time around. I mean, when there's a lot of unknown and when there's some good talent on that other side, even if they haven't come together, you can ride that a little bit and ride some momentum. And one thing Ed McCaffrey told me the other day is he said, hey, we have a lot of guys on our team that were overlooked by CU and that they wanted to get recruited by CU and they didn't, and there's some motivation there, and that's a real thing that could carry them a little bit into this game. At some point I do think CU is going to pull away and show that they're CU, but that's something that UNC could ride for a little bit in this game.
Yeah, it's all good to say that until you get hit in the mouth, right?
Right.
So as long as CU does what they need to do in the trenches, that shouldn't be an issue going, again, beyond those first few drives.
Yeah.
But again, it's hard to really dive into UNC just because we haven't seen them. It sounds like they had a scrimmage against Chadron State, which is interesting. That must be an FCS deal where they're allowed to do that?
Yeah, they did 2 scrimmages in the spring, actually, at Chadron State, and I think it was CSU Pueblo. Okay. There was somebody else up there, but yeah, it was some sort of deal they were able to do in the spring because they didn't have a season.
Got it.
So they did have a couple of scrimmages. I don't know how those turned out or what they look like, but you got to ask you because Ed McCaffrey's never coached at the college level. 2 years at Valor Christian. His defensive coordinator's never coached at the college level. Long-time high school defensive coordinator. His offensive coordinator is his son, who's never been a coach, period. And there's other guys on the staff that have only been high school coaches. Does that matter? I mean, if you can coach, right? But how much do you think that matters? How much do you think that experience is going to play out today or this week?
Well, I don't want to talk too far out of tune because I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah.
But I think when you're a head coach, if this is what is the situation up there, again, I don't know, but if you surround yourself with a bunch of yes men, it's all on you as a head coach.
Yeah.
And so Ed McCaffrey can't point to anybody in, if this is the way he wants to do it, that's fine. But generally, like they had Dave Baldwin there initially, you want, I think, some veteran coaches that can kind of test you on some things. At least that's how you would feel would be the best situation. Scott Darnell, their defensive coordinator, was, like you said, a long-time high school defensive coordinator, really good guy. When I first moved out here to Colorado, I was going out to Regis Jesuit where he was coaching, and he had a recruit that ended up going to USC. And I was lost. It was before you had the maps on your cell phone, so I'd printed out something from MapQuest. And it sounds so silly saying it now, but I couldn't find the school. And I go, I'm on Arapaho. He goes, do you mean Arapaho? And so, yeah, I had just moved out here, and I feel stupid now saying that looking back. But I hope Scott Darnell is doing well because he took care of me there at Regis back in the day.
Well, hey, I covered UNC in '96 when they won their first national title. I went to school there for a little bit, didn't graduate there, but hey, I hope UNC does well. I hope Ed McCaffrey works out. I just don't think that this game is going to work out that well for them. Let's do some score predictions here to wrap things up. What do you say?
Like I said, I expect there to be some issues with CU early on. Just, getting the rust off. And you always say you make your biggest jump from first game to second game. Well, I think quarter by quarter CU will get better in this game. And it's crazy. I know Vegas doesn't put out lines on FCS versus FBS programs. I saw the line offshore is 35.5 for this game. That's a pretty big number for a first game.
Yeah.
Even though, like we said, UNC hasn't played forever. I'm going to go 45-17. I do think we see a little Drew Carter, but not as much Drew Carter as most CU fans want going in this game.
All right. I'm going to say that they cover that spread. Okay. I'm going to go 52-14. I think UNC gets in the end zone a couple times. A little sluggish from CU at the beginning. I think they hit their stride, and we see a little more Drew Carter than you think we're going to see. But we'll see. 52-14. You've got
45-17.
That's our prediction, and we'll be back after the game to break it down.